We all know how the story goes. There is an old house at the top of the hill. It is an old place. It's been around as long as anyone can remember, but the thing with old houses, with old places, they have history. And boy oh boy, if these walls could talk. They would remain as they are, silent, because they know what happens if you draw attention. Unfortunately, these places tend to draw in the young ones, the dumb ones, those with bright futures, curious minds, adventurous spirits. Bets are made among friends, wagers, insults are thrown around, but what's important is that they are there, and when they're there, they never get the chance to leave. Those of you who are in the know of the topic of discussion know about Martin Walls, specifically his most well-known work, the FNAF-inspired analog horror series, The Walten Files. The series follows a succession of in-universe tapes documenting the disturbing happenings at the Bonds Burgers establishment. The means of getting the story across varied across employee training tapes, in-universe cartoons, playthroughs of in-universe video games, and surreal reenactments of events of the past. It's widely regarded as one of the greatest entries into the analog horror genre, but one fateful All Hallows Eve, we were given an unexpected treat. There is a certain charm to the tales of a lost episode, an episode to a beloved show that the creators deemed inappropriate for their audience. In the mind of a child, anything at all could be in there, and it's so easy for rumor to spread. There had to be a reason for why this episode didn't come out. It couldn't just be production woes. They finished it after all. They're just not sharing. And if they're not sharing, then surely there has to be something they don't want us to see. Something they don't want us to know. Something darker. Subscribe. Huh? What's that? Subscribe. Oh, it's just the spirit of shilling. Don't mind him. Just like the video to piss him off. Don't actually. Pretty please, you'll hurt my fifis. Alright, back to the video. The Mysterious House is a horror short made in the style of 1970s to 1980s cartoon PSAs, warning children and parents to be careful when trick-or-treating. The art style made very vibrant, with character background elements appearing overly saturated with color, and drawn similarly to how a child would. They even appeared to be cardboard cutout props, like those you would see on an episode of Sesame Street. Oh, where are my manners? Let's introduce our meat stars. The short features Tammy Cat and her friend, Ducky, a duo trick-or-treating for Halloween. The duo just seem to have finished trick-or-treating in their neighborhood, and it's getting very late for them. Ducky, the more reasonable of the two, suggests heading home instead because he doesn't want to stay out late. Tammy teases Ducky and suggests that they head over and trick-or-treat at one last house before they go home. Reluctantly, Ducky agrees. Word to the wise, don't be a doormat. If your friend is suggesting something stupid, put your foot down. You don't want to end up on a missing poster, would you? At some point, it just becomes natural selection. But as they go, the screen lingers upon the missing poster of one Johnny Bear. They arrive at the titular Mysterious House and are greeted at the door by who at this point we will only know as the Witch Sheep.
Trick or treat!
Why, hello there, little children. Are you looking for candy? Then come in, come in. We have candy for you too, silly bunnies.
She's so fine, she done pissing me off! How are you that fine?
In case this needs to be said, please never enter a stranger's house, especially if they're offering you candy. You never know if who you're talking to is a very, very bad person. Yet, in spite of all common sense, Tammy and Ducky accept the stranger's invitation and are met with her friends.
Thank you. I'm so glad you kids like it. Now, allow me to introduce my friends. This is Billy. TVA. And the pumpkin rabbit.
One of these friends snaps a photo, and the pumpkin rabbit explains that they like to take photos of their guests every Halloween. They even invite them to stay the night. And in spite of being very visually and audibly uncomfortable, Tammy and Ducky cave under the peer pressure the adults put them under, insisting that they stay. It's just one night after all. For their own safety, of course. However, looking around at the other photos on the wall, there's an assortment of other children, likely past trick-or-treaters, but one of them stands out. Johnny Bear, the missing child. Those photos taken earlier could be memories for the residents of the house, or perhaps trophies. That night, as the children sleep in prepared futons, something compels Ducky to wander about the house, be it needing to use the bathroom or some other reason. It doesn't matter. All that does is that we hear him call Tammy over, and she has to go find him, but...
Ducky? Oh. You scared me. How long have you been there? Where's the rest?
Gone are the child-friendly drawings, the saturated colors. This isn't a children's show anymore. This is real. There's no more happy ending. Not anymore. Nothing good comes from staying over at a stranger's. She follows Ducky's voice, beckoning her to go deeper and deeper into the depths of the house, leading her into its dark basement. Behind her back, we can see what must be the witch sheep from earlier, but she looks different, closing the doors behind her. But that isn't important now. What's important is finding Ducky, because surely Ducky must be fine. We've been hearing his voice, and I think we've seen him faintly, but it's so dark and dirty in here, and... What did you just step in?
I will sing your song, and it won't be very long, by the maiden.
Here, we learn the fates of every one of the past visitors to this forsaken place. Mangled bodies propped up like mannequins in a mockery of a party. The photographs upstairs just sick, twisted reminders, hunting trophies for uncaring, monstrous people. Heartbeat quickening, pupils dilating, tears form at the corners of your eyes, but before you can process what you're seeing,
what are you doing here?
What have you done?
What a naughty child, wandering around the house. I will have to punish you for being such a misbehaved little bunny. Don't worry, you won't feel a thing, and you'll get to be with us. Wouldn't you like that, little girl?
Get away from me!
The streets of Cairo, on the midway, we have never strayed. We never saw the kitty, poor little girl.
And so the story goes that those kids were never heard from again. At least until very, very recently. After all, you can only get away with something like this for so long before people find out.
Baby, won't you please come home? 'Cause your mama's all alone. I have tried in vain. Never no more to call your name. Oh, when you left, you broke my heart. Because I never thought that we would part. Every hour in the day, you gonna hear me say, baby, won't you please come home? Your mama needs you. Baby, won't you please come home? Your mama needs you. Baby, won't you please come on home? Come on home.
On Halloween of 2024, The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit was uploaded to the Walten Files YouTube channel, the sequel to The Mysterious House, taking place many years after the events of those that took the lives of poor Tammy and Ducky. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to implore you to watch the original episode before watching. The Mysterious House came out 3 years ago, but The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit is much, much more recent. As of writing, The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit has been out for 3 days, and it would be a very big disservice to yourself and your experience with this amazing piece of horror media if you don't watch it yourself. No video talking about it like this could ever really hope to match watching it blind, but if you don't want to, or you're just too invested in drawing or playing a video game or whatever, don't let me stop you. I'm just too invested in the story of this monstrous predator. No, not like that. What are you, a child? Okay, I walked into that one. Just know that I've linked the original in the description below. Now, without further ado, as we begin The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit, the most obvious difference between this entry and the last is the sheer difference in visual stylings. It makes sense. Before we were totally unfamiliar with what we were getting ourselves into, there was this veil of ignorance to the darkness symbolized by that vibrant and colorful art in the first episode, but after what we've all seen, we know what we're in for. Now the mask has already fallen, and we know that this is much more than a mere Halloween PSA. In fact, the video is structured more around a horror special of a TV show, which, admittedly, it really is. The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit opens with a trope well known to anyone in horror, specifically the slasher. A group of young ones make their way to the top of an old abandoned house at the top of the town hill on Halloween. Yet, wait, when we were here last, this house was still very, very occupied. Why is it in such disrepair? Well, turns out the house has become long abandoned, and the horrors that took place inside have long become urban myth. It is here where we get to meet our new group: Ralph, Jay, Dino, and Paco. Jay was the one who brought the group here, a young dog girl that wasn't dressed up for Halloween, or could be dressed up as Chucky, who knows really. There's Ralph, a dog boy in a Batman costume, Paco, a tiger boy dressed up as a vampire, and Dino, who is already my favorite, a bird boy in a dinosaur costume, so young that he can only really repeat others' words, likely having only recently gained the ability to talk. None of these kids have ever reached double-digit ages, most of them around the age of 5, so if anything happens, there's not really much that they can do. Jay, as the one who brought them there, gives them an explanation as to what is going on.
So this is the old waterman house. It's even cooler in person. Awesome!
So why was it abandoned?
Do you really want to know? Every year on All Hallows Eve, the Waterman house on the top of the hill would light up and greet children around town. And every year without exception, children would go missing.
And he calls to the frog who calls to the owl who blinks in a firelight.
No one suspected the Waterman couple until one day.
What's the matter with the moon tonight?
The sister of one of the victims saw them enter the house and they never came back. The police never found the bodies, so they couldn't do anything about it legally speaking, but the townsfolk knew just about enough. They forced the Watermans out of their home to the town square, and they decided to take matters into their own hands.
After the events of the mysterious house, Tammy's sister, who was revealed to have been following Tammy and Ducky during their final Halloween, ran back to the small town of Nash Lake and reported to the residents of the mysterious house, who we now know as the Watermans. What I would like to note is that the setup that's provided here is strikingly similar to the backstory of the slasher film A Nightmare on Elm Street. In Nightmare on Elm Street, the main antagonist, Freddy Krueger, was a serial child killer, much like the Waterman couple. The similarities continue when you consider what happened to them. While Krueger was alive, he was eventually caught and arrested for his murders, but was released from custody due to a technicality. Outraged, the parents banded together to enact vigilante justice upon Krueger, burning him to death. Sound familiar? But what's most concerning is that for unexplained reasons, after Krueger's public execution, his badly burned spirit would manifest again to terrorize the youth of Springfield. And if the pattern isn't broken, then... Jay suggests heading into the old Waterman house, scouting it for being a potential new clubhouse. Paco refuses at first, but relents and accepts, while Ralph refuses and does not budge, letting Jay and the others head inside without him, and quite frankly, he's the only one in the group with self-preservation of any kind. Heading inside, Jay, Dino, and Paco enter the guest area, Paco commenting on the smell. But what catches Jay's eye is a lone jack-o'-lantern sitting upon the old couch. Bringing out her father's lighter, she lights the jack-o'-lantern. But something isn't quite right. If this house is as abandoned as it was supposed to be, why is there a jack-o'-lantern on the couch? It isn't rotten, it's still orange. If the story Jay told the group was true, the events of the story must have happened quite a few years ago, much more time than it would have taken for a pumpkin like this to have completely decomposed. Yet the pumpkin looks completely pristine, brand new, having just been plucked from the pumpkin patch. And we get our answer when Jay lights the pumpkin.
Now, let's see what else.
I want you wives to bring your unsaved husbands. Children, bring your parents. Parents, bring your children. Christian, bring your neighbor. I want you to bring them here. I will not embarrass.
The old Waterman house isn't as abandoned as they first thought. Peeking into the room, the children find a familiar face.
Come on, sir. Away from God. Oh, Spirit of God. But now I'm coming.
Let's go, idiot. You're in the wrong house. What? No. This has got to be the same house.
Hello. I see you. There's no need to hide. I know you're there. Come here, little ones.
The children try to hide, but she knows that they're there. Beckoning them over, they approach, and she asks them their names and if they like candy, enticing them to stay a while. A familiar trick. But she's changed somewhat since we've last seen her. It seems that the townsfolk really did leave their mark.
My husband will be here soon.
She requests that they go into the kitchen to find the candy and take it to her. And the children obey for the most part, although Dino does not follow them. During the scene, when the kids enter the TV room following the sounds of a horribly mangled rendition of the Christian hymn Amazing Grace, you can see it off to the side. A mannequin. It's deep in the shadows and it's hard to make out, but a later side profile of Mrs. Waterman lets us get a better look at it. It bears a very striking resemblance to Johnny Bear. It's not out of the realm of possibility that the Watermans would keep little pseudo-trophies of their little Halloween hunts. But the interesting part of this interaction is how Dino, our little kleptomaniac, immediately went to steal a book from Mrs. Waterman's side. Note again, after stealing the book, Dino doesn't follow after Jay and Paco. Now, remember again what Mrs. Waterman's role was back in the mysterious house. She was not the knife of the family, tearing and ripping apart the victims. That role goes to her husband, Mr. Waterman. She was the skewer, the fork, the one who set things in motion and places down the traps. In the mysterious house, she was the one who suggested Tammy and Ducky enter the house. She was the one who followed Tammy in the dark and cut off all of her exits. She's the one who prepares the hunting grounds for her husband to have his fun. She's the schemer. He's the slasher. And what was it that she said?
My husband will be here soon.
The next scene has Jay and Paco entering the kitchen, but a voice calls out to Paco specifically. He turns to see this, saying that it knows a way out of the house, saying that he should follow it. Paco tries to get Jay's attention, but she's already left him behind. Desperate for a way out, Paco decides to follow the stranger, at least before we cut to the outside of the house, where Ralph is still waiting outside for his friends to come back out. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to go out of order from the actual video's timeline, to go through each of the children's complete stories individually. To see the stories paced out like intended, once again, please watch the original video, where in the original story, we would have seen what would have happened with Ralph after Paco sees that stranger in the doorway. But for now, let's continue off with Paco's escape attempt. We'll catch up with Ralph later. After all, he's the smart one who didn't go into the house. Surely he's fine. Paco decides to follow the stranger down the hallway, and now that they get a closer look, we can see that it's Ducky, the victim from the mysterious house. But doesn't the situation feel a little familiar? Tammy was lured to her death by apparitions of Ducky, so this doesn't bode very well for what Paco's been seeing. Paco turns to see the pictures lining the hallway, where before were pictures of previous trick-or-treaters, now sits their framed missing posters. Sick trophies for sick, sick people. Ducky and Paco arrive at their destination, his supposed way out, but when he steps inside, it's the guest room, the same one that Tammy and Ducky stayed in during the events of the mysterious house. You can even see their futons on the floor, untouched ever since that fateful Halloween. Paco's still taking it in, but behind him, Ducky's looming.
Mr. and Mrs. Waterman were very, very bad people.
No! No, please! I don't want to be left alone! Please don't do this! I don't want to be left alone! Please don't do this! Please! Please don't do this! Please!
Don't follow strangers, kids. Left in the dark, the only source of light is moonlight coming from the window, his only company the lifeless clown doll. But before he can think of getting out through the window, he turns his head and...
Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. If that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring. If that diamond ring turns glass, Mama's gonna... If that horse and cart fall down, you'll still be the sweetest little baby in town.
Outside, Ralph is still waiting for his friends to come out. He's playing with his ball out of equal frustration and nervousness. He throws his ball out of frustration and loses it off to the side of the house in the darkness by a mannequin that wasn't there before. Panicked, he goes after the ball, reluctantly walking to the pitch black side of the house. He wanders in against his better judgment, walking into the pitch black until he finds himself greeted by, oddly enough, human scarecrows by the entrance to the house's backyard. A pumpkin patch. And against his better judgment, he goes into the house's pumpkin patch, which, strangely enough, looks very well tended to. He looks through the pumpkins for his ball before the sudden laughter of a child grabs his attention. He sees the silhouette fade away. But before he can process this,
Hello there, little child. Are you lost?
it looks like Mr. Waterman is here to greet his guest. Ralph eyes the exit to the pumpkin patch, weighing his options, determining if he could outrun the Waterman patriarch, but
I think I have something you're looking for. Isn't this yours?
Yes. Yes, it is. Can I have it back, please?
Of course. Here.
Mr. Waterman offers him his ball. Ralph isn't having it. He knows he's in danger, so he moves to leave, to Mr. Waterman dangling the toy like a fisherman with a lure. It does not entice Ralph, though, who quickly moves for the exit, and before he can react, he bumps into something that wasn't there before. The remains of Tammy's body, propped up like a scarecrow with a bag over its head, likely because the Waterman skinned its face off, as we can see at the end card to the mysterious house. With Ralph now certain that he's in mortal danger, the pumpkin rabbit starts his pursuit, arms held out in a mockery of a scarecrow that was once a little girl. Ralph bursts into a full sprint, but he's nowhere near physically developed enough to have the strength to outpace Mr. Waterman. In his panicked scramblings, his foot gets stuck in one of the pumpkins, his leg tied up in the vines. And now you realize that the pumpkin patch has a dual purpose. These pumpkins are not just for consumption, but landmines placed to slow down anyone fleeing the Waterman residence. He's helpless as Mr. Waterman becomes more and more erratic, giddier and giddier as he stops walking and starts running through the patch after Ralph. Ralph has no way of getting out, and there's no one to save him. And when the monster's upon him... Inside the house, Jay, having just left Paco, is in the kitchen. She didn't know that she left her friend behind. She didn't know what to do, but then... she hears Ralph's dying screams from the window. Terrified, she backs herself into the kitchen cupboard, crawling inside to hide. But when she goes to close the door, she knocks over a candy bowl to the floor. She pleads from inside of the cupboard, wanting it all to end. We see a shot of the outside of the cupboard, the candy bowl gone, as if it was never there to begin with, or maybe as if someone had just cleaned it up. A familiar face suddenly peeks back at Jay from outside the cupboard. It's Ralph, or what Jay thinks is Ralph. The being outside the cupboard perfectly mimics Ralph's voice, but from what we can see, the face isn't the same as before. What was once cute button eyes are now mangled, the mouth mangled, but Jay can't quite make it out in the darkness of the cupboard. The voice implores Jay to open the cupboard, preying on her hope that she and her friends can finally go home. But what's out there definitely isn't Ralph. The pumpkin rabbit's manic laughter echoes in the house while Jay crawls through the cupboard frantically, trying to get away. She briefly looks behind herself as Mr. Waterman contorts and twists his body, bones audibly snapping as he fits himself into the cupboard just to get at Jay. Ralph's blood fresh on his face, the thrill of the hunt exciting him, making him manic. He gets a grip on Jay's leg, but she manages to grab a cup and smashes it on his face, knocking his mask loose, giving us a peek at what's underneath, and her an opening. But she doesn't linger, using this chance to sprint away as fast as she can, and in her mad dash,
hey, yo, the pizza here. Oh, nigga.
If I'm being completely honest, the death of Ralph was probably the most uncomfortable and upset I've been by a piece of media for some time now. It isn't even entirely because we got to see the explicit, gruesome slaughter of an adorable Beanie Baby animal child, but the unholy combination of the atmosphere, the pacing, the soundtrack, the vocal performances, it's all just the perfect recipe for a damn good horror scene. Now, something I'd like to note is the presence of human scarecrows being placed at the front of the Waterman pumpkin patch. There seems to be this recurring visual motif of inanimate objects with human proportions. The presence of so many mannequins, the emphasis on scarecrows, I just find it strange that this is the only presence of humans in the entire film. I just assume that this is a reference to some of the human characters in Martin Wall's main horror series, The Walten Files, but I'm not quite sure. The mannequins are also a very persistent, recurring presence throughout the film, although for now, let's just put them at the back of our mind and set it towards the more pressing issue. The Pumpkin Rabbit, or Mr. Waterman. This man has got to be one of the best slasher villains I've seen. He's not campy, the only joy being the mania this monster experiences when he gores toddlers. What I like to point out is how the Watermans don't look like animatronics anymore, unlike their mysterious house counterparts. It really just adds to the idea that these two are just a crazed serial killer couple. They're much more organic this time around, with the exception of Mr. Waterman's clawed metal hands, his preferred murder weapon. He's very hands-on with how he conducts his business. It just adds to his monstrous side. He's not really using a tool. There's no knife, there's no machete because he is the knife, and I really like that. His hands being his main weapon also brings to mind Freddy Krueger's clawed glove, although compared to the pumpkin rabbit, Krueger was much more prone to using more unsubtle supernatural abilities. Speaking of, I really like how methodical the Watermans are with their hunts. Mr. Waterman, for example, was very obviously watching Ralph the entire time, and only pounced when he had him in his territory, the pumpkin patch, a place where it would be very easy to trap yourself stepping in a pumpkin. And let's not beat around the bush any longer. The Watermans very obviously have supernatural powers. We first see it when we see the apparition of Ducky back in the mysterious house that lured Tammy to her death, in addition to Mrs. Waterman's teleportation. They very clearly also have some kind of spirit manipulation, as evidenced by Mrs. Waterman puppeteering Ducky's corpse and spirit around as a lure for Paco. I find it oddly out of character for Mrs. Waterman to apparently directly harm one of the children. She typically leaves her dirty work to her husband. I suppose being burned alive makes you more prone to toddler mangling. Now, don't get it twisted. The only reason the kids lived as long as they did is because the Watermans love to play with their food. If Ralph turned to leave the front of the house instead of going for his ball, I have no doubt that Mr. Waterman would have slaughtered him right then and there. The fact that the mannequin appeared where there was none earlier was the hint at his presence there. The kids all sealed their fates the moment they stepped upon those cursed grounds. After crashing to the bottom of the stairs, Jay's relieved to finally meet back up with a friendly face. I suppose the main reason why Dino's lived so long is because Dino, little renegade that he is, didn't listen to Mrs. Waterman's request. He just wandered around the house on his own and didn't fall for the same traps that Paco or Jay did. Following Mrs. Waterman's request just put them in situations where they would be separated, in rooms with only one exit so they could be cornered and finished off. The only reason Jay lived was because she got lucky. She got a cheap shot. Without that, Dino would have been left by himself. Speaking of, Dino shows Jay the photo album that he snatched from Mrs. Waterman, which they open and read together, giving us a lot of information. First, the full names of the Watermans, Lorenzo and Rachel Waterman, followed by various pictures inside of the book, the same ones that were once framed on the wall in the mysterious house, the keepsake pictures the Watermans would take of each one of their victims, each dated the Halloween of every year. Apparently, ever since 1975, according to what we can see here. We even get to see some familiar faces, and what they really looked like. But the important part comes in when Jay flips to the most recent edition.
Is that us?
The Watermans knew that they were coming and snapped a photo of them preemptively. This wasn't a freak attack. They knew the kids were coming. This was all premeditated. If you look closely during the beginning of the film, you can see the exact moment when Mrs. Waterman snaps the picture of the soon-to-be victims. With this information in hand, and the only way out no doubt being blocked by Mr. Waterman, the only way forward is to go even deeper into the house, the darkest, most evil part of the house, the Waterman playhouse. They better move quickly. Walking deeper in, the duo find the source of that music, a mangled corpse of a robot, or perhaps more likely, the body of someone whose costume was a robot, made into a perverted shrine for the Waterman record player. Taking it in, Jay steps into one of the rooms, immediately finding another corpse. Much like Tammy had been turned into a scarecrow, the flesh having long decayed away, the Watermans replacing it with straw, like sick taxidermy. She tentatively steps inside and steps on something. A photo. Much like those in the photo album, this one was dated before any of the others, 1974, featuring children dressed up like a clown and a robot with Mr. Waterman's devil-like grin hovering over their heads. Those in the know will know these characters as TVA and Billy from the mysterious house. It seems that they, like Ducky, were just children that the Watermans puppeteered around to lure in their victims. Moving onwards, Jay comes to the remains of Billy, and with a key conveniently placed inside of his decaying mouth, she grabs it and heads out of the room with Ducky, only to hear... They're coming down the stairs. They rush in for another room, the one that the key can unlock, Jay immediately running in after seeing a window to the outside. In her hurry, she slips and hits a light bulb, apparently knocking it out of place to light up the room. And oh, what a sight. Mannequins, missing posters, bloody walls, horrid wall art of smiling, laughing children. The wall with the window painting with "The End," with a rainbow, a taunting message from the Watermans for any poor soul that ends up here. This is their dead end.
Mr. and Mrs. Waterman were very, very, very bad people. Oh, you're in trouble now. Playtime is over, children. This year's hunt has been so delightful. It's so much fun when they hide. But now I seek. And oh, when I find you, little bunnies, I will rip, and I will cut, and I will punish you.
Mr. Waterman is here, but he has one last surprise for the two. Paco's dead, mutilated body, gored and torn. He's strung up, just like another scarecrow.
What did you do to him?
But he's just a distraction. Mr. Waterman wastes no time, immediately going to tear Dino apart. Dino himself being too weak to fight back, Mrs. Waterman appears behind Jay, grabbing her and stopping her from interfering with her husband's favorite hobby. Luckily, Jay tears herself from the witch's grasp, going to defend Dino, knocking Mr. Waterman's mask off his face before Dino's given the Ralph treatment. And his mask is off. Jay goes to reach for something to defend herself, the only thing her hands find being the Waterman photo album and her dad's lighter. The pumpkin rabbit gets his bearings, but something's different. He seems off guard, almost desperate, and as intimidating as he is, he's just given Jay an idea.
No, what have you done?
So ends the Watermans, burned once more. First by the parents, and now, finally, the victims of their horrid massacres. Except now, something tells me that they're gone for good this time. And the kids are finally, at last, safe. They fall asleep in each other's arms to be awakened by a door opening. It's Jay's father, a police officer. The nightmare really, truly is over. The two of them move to leave, but there's something different in this room. All of the mannequins of the victims are gone, all except two. A rabbit and a sheep. It really was the end for them. Good riddance. Maybe this time, they'll stay down. As Jay and Dino drive away in Jay's father's police car, they look out the window, seeing the recently freed spirits of Paco and Ralph standing in the bushes. They may not have survived, but at the very least they were not condemned to whatever hell the Watermans would have put their spirits through. Free to move on. And that's the end to The Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit. Honestly, one of the very best pieces of horror media that I've seen in a really, really long time. 100% kudos goes to everyone involved in making what I can only really call a horror slasher masterpiece. It's fantastic. The visuals, the music choice, atmosphere, cinematography, all gold stars all the time. I know I just recapped the entire thing, but damn it, I'm the one making the video and I'm watching it again. It's just that good, so do it. Watch it again. Honestly, it's so great seeing the improvement from Martin Walls and the rest of the Walten Files team. And now that the movie's over, and yes, I am calling it a movie, let's analyze it a little. Specifically, what I think about the Watermans and their photography. You see, I have this little theory in regards to how their supernatural powers worked. You see, there was this belief at one point that photography or cameras were able to steal your soul, and that this idea was part of why the Watermans' powers were connected to their photo album, specifically their control over the souls of their victims, like how, for example, Ducky was often used to lure children into danger, or how Tammy's spirit was invoked to distract Ralph, ultimately getting him killed. It's also why Lorenzo Waterman was able to completely perfectly mimic Ralph's voice immediately after killing him. The Watermans claimed a stake over the souls of all four of the kids when they snapped that photo. The only thing that they needed to do to reap the benefits was to rip the souls from their living bodies. It's why Mr. Waterman was able to perfectly mimic Ralph's voice to trick Jay, exactly how he tricked Tammy using Ducky's voice. Also note how the photo of Billy and TVA wasn't burned like the rest of the victims. Unfortunately, their photo wasn't part of the album, and it stayed on the floor in the room with Billy's corpse, so it seems that those two remain haunting the Waterman household. You can even see two more mannequins that aren't Lorenzo or Rachel Waterman when Jay and Dino go to walk out of the house. We know that these mannequins aren't the Watermans because one is standing up, and the other one is apparently knocked over, while the Waterman mannequins are both sat down. It makes this all the more tragic, knowing that they were very likely the very first victims the Watermans claimed, or at the very least the first that they could cast this dark magic on, at least from what we can tell from the contents of the film. Yet, they were the only ones denied freedom from this hell. Now, on to bonus content. There's some behind-the-scenes info about the Return of the Pumpkin Rabbit that I didn't know about before watching the actual movie. Shout out to Jamie L for giving me somewhere to find this extra documented stuff. An example here is this painting of the Waterman couple, styled after the famous painting American Gothic, although the couple in this piece are a lot more festive and cheery than the ones in American Gothic. Another piece of content to know is that according to the Lost Child posters, the earliest victim is, I want to say, a rabbit? Dog? By the name of Brittany Johnson, who was taken in 1950, according to this screenshot from Mr. Waterman's voice actor, Ava. I say rabbit because it looks strikingly like Little Bon from the Walten Files proper. It means that the Watermans have been at this for a lot longer than was initially alluded to with TVA and Billy. Other behind-the-scenes content is mostly HD versions of some of the movie's scenes. Good stuff. And there's also some concept art of the Watermans from when production of the film started. And also the script document. What a travesty. There's also some storyboards and scripts for some deleted scenes. Very cool stuff here, and I speculate that they were taken out for the sake of pacing, but it contains the only real scene of the Watermans interacting directly. The basement scene would have also been a bit longer and gone in a different direction, changing how Dino and Jay would have encountered Mr. Waterman through a handcrafted puppet show made just for them. But I understand why this was taken out too. It makes it seem like the Watermen still have the same amount of premeditated control over the situation, having scripted out the entirety of their hunt. Although it is a reference to the minigame Puppet Show from Night of the Living Robot, the game meant to be the Halloween teaser for Welcome to Bond's Burgers, the cancelled FNAF fan game precursor to what is now the Walten Files, and serves as the very first appearance of the Pumpkin Rabbit and other Halloween-themed Bond's Burgers characters. There is apparently also a secret Christmas room, which was also scrapped. Outside of this, the behind-the-scenes stuff just devolves into shitposting, like this image of how the Pumpkin Rabbit got his face all fucked up. There is also this image where the wretched Lorenzo Waterman shares his affection for poor Rachel Waterman. The slimes of love. Also, there's this image of what Lorenzo Waterman looked like before he got his face torn off. Not a candid depiction, but it's nice to see. Little shithead. There's also the revelation on the origins of Dino and Jay. They were childhood plushies of Martin and his girlfriend, with every other character just being original creations. They just couldn't bring themselves to kill off their childhood plushies, so that's why they got off relatively scot-free. Onto a different matter. Apparently the return of the Pumpkin Rabbit was originally intended to be a short meant to promote the Walten Files Halloween Pumpkin Rabbit and Witch Sheep Mateship plush campaign, the Watermans being turned into plushies at the very end. But the crew decided, fuck it, and just turned it into a full-blown sequel, and the world has yet to recover. You can see that there's another video on the Walten Files channel advertising the plushies, also extremely high quality, styled after PS1 games taken in the first person. We also get the reason why Ralph was so attached to his ball, even after having thrown it behind the, quote, murder house. Apparently the ball is of great sentimental value. Not sure what that means, but my headcanon is that it's actually the shrunken heads of literally all of his family members put inside of a rubber ball. They were called the Bouncymans. Don't question it. And that's about it. Thank you for sticking around. Now, before you step out, I'd like to thank all of you for 8,000 subscribers. Holy moly. That's actually a number I never thought I'd hit, but hey, here we are. I guess I'm gonna have to follow up on that 10k promise sooner than I'd expected. Details on that, I'm going to set up a channel on my fan-made Discord. Unofficial, official, but not really, for the purpose of getting down at least 20 OCs from all of you, and I'll be drawing and featuring all of those at the end of my videos alongside any fan art I get. Call it an early bird special. Speaking of fan art, I'd like to take the time to thank every person who took time to make fan art of me. It's super duper flattering and I love all of it. If you're artistically inclined and want to make fan art and send it my way, you can reach me on Twitter and Blue Sky at these handles. If you want to support me extra, I got a Ko-Fi that you can donate to if you want. I haven't had the time to make much art compared to my earlier videos. Life gets in the way, you probably understand. But thank you all one last time for staying. Be sure to tip your server with a like or subscribe if you're feeling particularly satisfied. Stay safe, and good night. Wait, What do you mean it's November and I started working on this video after Halloween and because I had midterms? Wait, then that means... Oh no.
Ho, ho, ho!
Wait, what?